Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. Today we will continue and try and finish the lecture on communication strategy, and then we will start one of the major topics that we have in this particular consumer behavior side is the way reference groups and families influence consumer behavior. The reason is, for that particular aspect, is to try and locate those reference groups whose behaviors normally tend to mold the behavior of our consumers or our target markets. The idea is that if we can understand the reference group, we should be able to develop strategies and marketing communications which will be able to influence the individual. So we will take a better look into that area. But at this point of time, we will quickly recapitulate what we have been discussing, and what we left last time we will finish, and then in the end we will look at the model. The model which we started from, and if you recall, that model was very simplistic, but this time when we show the model, it will have incorporated all the discussions that we have had till now, and we will make sure that all the things are clearly laid down so that we can move on to the next one. If you recall now, we had been talking about, and we started the discussion with the message or the communication objectives. There were some objectives. To meet these objectives, we had decided that we need to also know, once we know the objectives, we need to know and understand the target market, because that characteristics of the target market will help us determine the nature of the message. But this is not alone. The factor of having understanding the market is not sufficient to be able to actually develop our strategy. We also need to know the media, because the kind of media we have will also determine the way the message will be encoded. So we need to understand our objectives, whether it is creating awareness, whether we have to change perceptions, whether we want to increase our sales, whatever it is, we need to be very clear. Then we need to understand the target market, their level of understanding, background, the demographics, and so on and so forth. And obviously then we are interested in the media, and what we discussed at that point of time was that medias normally have their own profiles, the media profile, which means who the readerships are, who the people who read them are, what are their characteristics, what are their natures. And on the other side, we know what are the characteristics of the target market, and then we try and link those two things up. In trying to link these two things up, what we are trying to now figure out is what would be the message itself. How would we encode the message that we want? Because remember one thing, the final objective of our communication strategy is for the marketer that whatever he wants to communicate to the target will be understood exactly as the marketer wanted it to be understood. Because if there is a gap between the two, then miscommunication will result, and it can lead to so many other problems. So when we are looking at the aspects of message, and we were trying to figure out what the message strategy would be, we have to see 4 or 5 things in terms of what will be the logic behind. Involvement theory was one of the most important, significant aspects, where we decided that if a person is very strongly involved in the message or in the process, communication or purchase process, then we might as well take the direct route, which is more cognitive. And if the person is not so involved in it, we may take the peripheral route, which means we might use the imagery, the scene, the model, whatever, to communicate our message. So, and that part of creating these things is also known as encoding. Beyond that, we will also discuss the format of our message. Now, we have already talked about a bit, but just to recapitulate, you could have one-sided or two-sided argument, which is a very simple thing to do. Either I just tell you all the good points and tell you to buy, or I can speak on either side of the picture. There have been a lot of discussion, a lot of research in this area, and it has been concluded by research that if you show both the sides, particularly where competitors can show the other side, so where particularly the competitors can also move in and show the different pictures, it's much better to use the two-sided argument. If there is no fear from competitors moving in, then one-sided logic might be more suitable. Not only this, it's also related to, again, the cognitive issue, the involvement issue. If a person is more involved, then he would or she would like कि उनके सामने दोनों आर्ग्यूमेंट्स रखे जाएं, अच्छा भी और बुरा. लेकिन अब सवाल ये पैदा होता है, how bad can you talk about your own self? So the logic is to make sure that the message which may communicate something negative should be just enough. इतना हो कि जो बाकी अच्छा मैसेज है वो उसको न्यूट्रलाइज कर दे, so that the lasting impression does not stay. And I gave you an example of hair growth product. तो उसमें कंपनी ने जाहिर है they wanted to show कि everybody, I mean they could have said कि every 100% hair growth took place on all our clients, but what they did was they specified that 60% had extensive or medium growth, 15% less growth, and 10% no growth, meaning thereby that they had, without complicating, created a picture कि इसमें कुछ ऐसी भी gaps होंगे कि जो काउंटर किए जा सकते हैं. मिसाल के तौर पे if I had said totally 100%, somebody could come and say, well, this did not happen to me, which will again have a direct impact on what we have been discussing up till now, the reliability of the communication. How reliable is this communication? Because that has a very significant impact on believability. Can I believe your message? If I believe your message, well, I'm more influenced to buy or to behave in the way you want me to behave in relation to my product. With that, we had also discussed whether we should have comparative advertising, and we had clearly specified that comparative cultural based hai. America mein, for example, 30% of the advertising is normally comparative, but there is an argument against that. The argument says कि जब हम comparative करते हैं तो हमें दूसरे product का नाम देना पड़ेगा. अगर नाम देंगे तो that may invoke awareness of the competitive product, and it could be possible that a good impression of the competitive product might flow through when you are trying to use this comparative. But हकीकत ये है कि research जो की गई है, they suggest that comparative advertisements are more influential in bringing about behavioral change. It affects behavior. इसी तरह से advertising appeals होती हैं. Now, appeals are, it could be using the fear concept, the fun concept, or humor concept. Or again, the logic was कि fear has a limited impact. Particularly, अगर बहुत ज़्यादा fear create किया जाए तो लोग dissonance की वजह से, because of cognitive dissonance, they try and reject the message और उसके लिए अपने लिए rationals बना लेते. अगर वो rational बना के उस message को reject कर दें तो उस message का जो impact है वो नहीं होता. तो that is why they say that the fear should be reduced. I mean, the content of the fear should be a little less. On the other side, it was very clearly stated that humor जो है या fun जो है, that it becomes more persuasive. And if you see, most of our ad in the Pakistani environment is of this nature. और उसके अंदर particularly जहां हम समझते हैं कि positive attitude create करना है और positive image create करना है brand के लिए, तो फिर humor becomes the more logical of impact. Third appeal जो है वो तकरीबन abrasive appeal कहते हैं, जिसका मतलब है जरा काफी खुरदरी किस्म की, in the sense कि the message that is being shown does not fit with the idea of it not being nice, in the sense that some ads tend to show clogged noses, zukam hai to naak beh rahi hai, which does not look very nice. Sometimes people show पेट में जलन है तो you show the inside of the stomach. Sometimes you show insecticides हैं तो you show कीड़े मकोड़े, and all that has an impact. Therefore, sometimes that kind of appeal is also used, and it is considered कि इस किस्म की जो अपील है, abrasive किस्म की, वो उन लोगों को ज़्यादा सूट करती है जिनकी तकलीफ they cannot express it but feel it inside. And the logic is कि उनके जहन में ये पिक्चर पैदा होती है कि चूंकि इन्होंने हमारी तकलीफ को समझने की कोशिश की एंड देयरफॉर it must be more reliable because they have been able to understand our insight. For example, सर में दर्द है तो you show a hammer hitting the head. तो पेन इस तरह की भी होती है कि ऐसे लगता है जैसे कोई हथौड़ा मार रहा है. Now, if that is reflected in the message, तो जिनके जहन में वो तकलीफ उस किस्म की होती है, they feel more comfortable, they are more attuned to the reliability of this kind of a message. Finally, हम एक sensitive issue की तरफ आते हैं जो कि बहुत discussion में आता रहा है, and that is use of gender in advertisement, in the sense that people have been using women well dressed as models as against males. अब issue ये है कि दोनों में से किसका impact ज़्यादा है. Research ये कहती है, and this research has been conducted in the Western world, कि इससे कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता. Rather, उनका कहना यह है कि if the model is too made up, too in such a place कि उसको जैसे expose किया जा रहा हो खास तौर पे, तो उसकी जो appeal है वो किसी को भी समझ नहीं आएगी because उनका focus सिर्फ तस्वीर देखने पे रह जाएगा. So therefore, what they suggest is that that is not a good approach to create an image because दोनों का इस्तेमाल is totally neutral. Rather, they suggest that if you have an overmade model, then जो उसका जो message है वो lose कर जाता है because लोगों की ज़्यादा attention जो है वो model पे होती है. Having talked about this, let's go and look at the model before we take a little bit of time to discuss the ethical issues which surround this communication process. Now, if you see on the screen, it's the same message, but it's a little bit more clarified in terms of how does it work. We see that sender is at the beginning. He is the commercial organization or whatever it is, commercial, non-profit, whatever. Before the message comes in, we need to have a encoding system, which could be using the picture, symbols, or words. Then this message could also be in terms of whether it's verbal, non-verbal, it is one-sided, two-sided, it could be facts, like we have talked about in terms of cognitive theory, more facts are required, or it is related to emotions, which we said is the peripheral route to involvement and the convincing of the consumer. Then we come into the channel, and the channel or the media system is where we find paid or non-paid. Obviously, we talked about publicity as being a non-paid and a very strong impact on consumers, plus word of mouth. We have talked about that. Then we look at that the channels could be either print or broadcast or electronic or even the web-based channels, which we have discussed in detail. Then we have discussed the issue between the channel when the message is going to the receiver, where we have a problem of selective exposure, which means basically that people tend to ignore all the other messages which are not related to them, or they try and skip over the advertisements, particularly on the television. And there are a number of electronic systems now available कि जो TV को record कर लेते हैं programs को, and you can sit and watch those programs without having to go through all the advertisements, because you can either zip through the system or block the ad totally, or you can switch the program when the ad is taking place. So there is a lot of issues which has to be overcome. और उसमें से एक issue का तरीका ये था कि simultaneously वही ad मुख्तलिफ channels में दिखा रहे हैं या मुख्तलिफ programs पे उसको launch किया हुआ हो, so that if you even move from one to the other, you will see the same ad. ये strategies हैं, the advertisers normally tend to use them. Now, the receiver requires to receive the message, and he tries to decode the message, in the sense he tries to understand what the message was. अगर तो उसको बिल्कुल ठीक समझ आ गई तो उसका जो behavior है वो उसी तरफ जाएगा जो आप चाहते हैं. In the sense that if you were creating awareness, awareness will be created. If you wanted to change his perception, perception change will take place. However, if it doesn't happen, then what will happen is that we understand that there will be some kind of miscommunication, or what we call there is some miscomprehension of the message. Now, if that happens, we need to immediately try and change the wording, the message, the image, whatever it is. And this is where we bring in the feedback system. So There were two methods we suggested. One was the pre-testing frame, where we can ensure that the message is going to be encoded or decoded exactly as the marketer or the sender wanted it. And we can also do post-test, which is after the advertisement has been launched, we normally tend to get surveys done to find out whether the message was clearly understood, how well it was understood, and so on and so forth. Now, this brings us to the end of the model. Now you look at the ethical issues and some important points that we had been talking about in terms of positioning and targeting. They become very important. Or yahan, what we are going to be thinking about is how does the precision take place in terms of the targeting of a particular customer group. We know that data analysis and data is available, and actually companies can now very precisely send messages customized to individuals who fit in with their profile. लेकिन अब issue क्या है? जैसे very recently we had this issue which has been recognized that sometimes with this specifically targeted things, the message or the advertisement could go beyond the normal behavioral requirements. जैसे हमने पहले भी सोचा था कि कई जगहों के ऊपर गलत behaviors भी आ सकते हैं, और इसमें एक बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग केस जो अब हमें नजर आ रहा है वो है अबाउट लेट नाइट पैकेजेस व्हिच आर गिवन बाय मोबाइल फोन्स. अब अपनी तरफ से द कंपनी इज ट्राइंग टू प्रोवाइड अ सर्विस, बट उसका इम्पैक्ट स्टूडेंट्स के ऊपर ये हो रहा है कि रात को अगर दे आर गोइंग टू यूज दिस काइंड ऑफ अ मैसेज और मैसेजिंग सर्विसेज throughout the night, because it's cheaper at that time and they most probably use it for talking to your friends and so on and so forth, they are losing out on the educational systems that they should be focusing on. रात भर अगर आप मैसेजिंग करेंगे तो सुबह पढ़ना तो आसान नहीं होगा, and that is where Punjab government also passed a kind of a resolution saying that this is not correct. यही चीज ethical issues में एक बड़ी categorical है, और उसमें ये है कि if people can go and start doing, because of the influence that people have, they can specifically target, they can send direct messages, and therefore it can lead to some confusion. एक issue जो इसके अलावा है, that is very simple, कि content of जो proportional message है वो कितना accurate होना चाहिए. I mean, is there कि if I say my brand is the best, उसकी कोई लॉजिक है? अगर उसकी लॉजिक नहीं है तो वो क्या ऐसी इशू है जो can confront us? This is one of the aspects that we need to cover in the ethical issue. मिसाल के तौर पे अगर हम कहें कि हमारी जो टूथपेस्ट है वो दांतों को कवर करती है या दांतों की कैविटीज को प्रोटेक्ट करती है, कितना प्रोटेक्ट करती है, that becomes a major concept, and therefore we need to bring it into position कि कहीं हम कोई ऐसा क्लेम ना कर दें जो कि डिसेप्टिव हो जाए, यानी कि जो तकरीबन हमारे कहने के मुताबिक if I use a very strong word कि जो धोखे के रमजे में आ जाए, तो उसको अवॉइड करने के लिए we need to be very careful कि किस पॉइंट तक हम एडवर्टाइज में एग्जिजरेशन कर रहे हैं और किस जगह पे डिसेप्शन शुरू हो जाती है. एग्जिजरेट करना और डिसेप्शन में ये फर्क है, which we need to be very carefully look into and we need to be very careful about. After this, we have already discussed all the other issues. Now I will be going into the discussion of a group influence on consumer behavior. We have been discussing at this point communication strategy का influence on consumer behavior. Now we are trying to figure out कि जो associations हैं लोगों की आपस में, उनका कितना impact होता है एक consumer के ऊपर और उसके behavior के ऊपर. So before we go anywhere, we need to define कि group है क्या. Now, group is any two or more people who interact, whether in an intimate setting or in a very formal workplace setting. Now, when I say intimate, that means it's a very close-knit thing like family. Family is more intimate, whereas if you are working in an organization, तो जो लोग आपके आसपास हैं, वो work group के हिसाब से वो भी group कहलाता है. Group यही नहीं है. There are sometimes one-sided group. Now, one-sided group is where I am interacting with only models on the advertisement. There is no direct interaction, but I watch. So I am part of a group, which is the model, but there is no interaction. There is no link between the two, but we still form a group in the sense I look at the ad, I look at the model, and I am in my mind interacting and trying to create a reference point. The other aspect of this grouping system is कि इसका फायदा बहुत ज्यादा है. फायदा क्या है कि उसके लिए आपको किसी ग्रुप का मेंबर होना लाजमी नहीं है, so that you don't have to have a particular membership within a group, but association, symbolic grouping, which basically means that you are not directly involved. Indirectly, you might have a reference which targets you towards a particular group, but you are not interacting, you are not really a member of that group. तो ग्रुप्स का एक फायदा मार्केटर को ये है कि अगर वो अंडरस्टैंड कर ले कि कौन से लोग किस ग्रुप से साथ लिंक होते हैं, एंड वी हैव ऑलरेडी सीन दैट मोस्ट ऑफ द मॉडल्स, सेलिब्रिटीज, ये जितने भी हैं ये रेफरेंस ग्रुप बनते हैं. एंड दोज रेफरेंस ग्रुप एक्चुअली अगर आप उनके बिहेवियर को देखें तो जो लोग उनसे लिंक होना चाहते हैं या उन ग्रुप के साथ अपने आप को एसोसिएट करते हैं, तो वो ज्यादातर उन्हीं के बिहेवियर्स को अडॉप्ट करने की कोशिश करते हैं. अब इन ग्रुपिंग में तो रेफरेंस तो एक पॉइंट बन जाता है कि जहां यू आर ट्राइंग टू फिगर आउट कि किस पॉइंट के ऊपर ये रेफरेंसिंग आएगी. बट दो किस्म के हैं दीज ग्रुप्स. वन इज कॉल्ड द नॉर्मेटिव ग्रुप, व्हिच बेसिकली इज where basic behavioral changes take place and influences on the basic behaviors. तो behavior जहां change करेगा वहां normative हो जाएगा. The other aspect which is very important is comparable. Now comparable में क्या है कि we try and figure out कि benchmark कर लेते हैं. हम किसी एक group को benchmark कर लेते हैं और we look at their behaviors and then see our behavior in relation to that, और वो benchmarking के through we keep trying to change or modify our behaviors in line with the reference group that we have already created for ourselves. So basically reference group में जो सबसे important हमने देखा as part of our life becomes the family, and we will discuss this in substantial detail at a later stage. अब कुछ examples we can take regarding the normative and the comparative. Normative में जैसे मैंने कहा family, which we will be discussing in detail, वहाँ ड्रेस, खाना, आप क्या पसंद करते हैं, what do you would like to eat, how would you like to dress, other behavioral factors, all are things that you learn from the family, and we will also look at some others which create the normative frame are like friends, work groups, and so on and so forth. They try and change your actual behaviors, they try and influence your basic behaviors. But comparative के अंदर we can have a good example is, let's say your neighbor. You look at the neighbor's lifestyle, you look at the things that the neighbor has, घर में क्या चीजें हैं और क्या उनकी गाड़ी कैसी है, उनके रहन सहन का तरीका क्या है, and whatever there is, and we try and judge ourselves in relation to that. When we do this, this becomes a comparative frame. And now what are the factors that actually influence our behavior from the reference group? मकसद कहने का ये है कि कुछ फैक्टर्स हैं जो इन रेफरेंस ग्रुप्स के इन्फ्लुएंस को भी इन्फ्लुएंस करते हैं. I mean, I will repeat again that there are certain factors which try and influence the influence of the reference group on the consumer behavior. उसके लिए we look at the model, and if you look at the model, you will see that at the center of the model is the individual, and there are circles around. And all these circles represent some kind of a group that influences this individual. और हम ये देखते हैं कि पहले जैसे सर्कल में जो कि बहुत क्लोज है is particularly the family. The second circle is the friend. The third is the social class in which the person finds himself. The fourth is these selected subcultures that we have. We might select a subculture which could be maybe a club that we have joined. We could have a particular university that we have gone to. These are selected subcultures that we have. Political parties and so on and so forth. Then we have our own culture to whom we belong to. Finally, we see that there are some other cultures which are broad, and we may go international on that, and we can see, we have been discussing that very often. We see that people tend to say that Western culture is moving in, we export culture, the Indian culture has gone to America, and so on and so forth. So finally, we see that all of these various reference groups have an impact on the individual. But what we need to now understand is कि इस influence के ऊपर वो कौन से features हैं जो impact करते हैं? What are those factors which actually have an impact on the influence that these factors create on the consumer? So influence के ऊपर influence का मामला है, so we will look at it. Now, there are about 5 factors, but the first one is information and experience. It's very simple to understand. For example, if I already have an experience of, let's say if I want to go to a restaurant, and or maybe I am a salesperson who wants to take his client to a restaurant, and I'm already aware of a good restaurant, then I don't think I need anybody to influence me in terms of choice of that restaurant. I don't need that. However, if I don't know, what would I do? I will tend to ask either my family member or a friend, or if I was, these are the two direct, okay? This is what we call the direct influence of normative influence. But if I do not have these people also who can guide me to the right place, I could go the indirect way and try and find out where do business people meet for lunch. And maybe because of that choice, I can go there. Now, the idea is that if there is experience or information flow is available, then I may not have to actually look at the reference groups for guidance. I can do it on my own. On the other side, we may have a credibility or power or attractiveness of the reference group itself. And we've already discussed this credibility issue when we were talking about the credibility of the message or the communication. And the idea was that if I am trustworthy, or the group, reference group is trustworthy, it is more likely to influence my behavior. We've also talked about the attractiveness of the models. If the person who is speaking to you gives you that feeling of goodness, then obviously there is more chances that the influence will be higher. And we're talking about, again, let's say reference group. So whenever we look at the reference group, if the reference group itself is strong, powerful, we will tend to become more influenced. So all these factors do create a particular kind of an influence. And this time we are talking about not individuals, but the whole group as a whole, per se, as a group together. Finally, we also have the idea of the conspicuousness of the product. Now, if the product is very conspicuous and it will be visible to other people, when we talk about conspicuousness, it basically means visibility of the product or the brand that we're going to use. Now, if it is very conspicuous and we need to be able to show that we are being, it's visible, so we want to associate with a particular group, then obviously that group's behavior will have a very strong influence on my behavior, or the group's choice will become my choice, because the group can see that I am using the same brand, the same product, or same conceptualization. On the other side, if it is not, let's say if I use the product privately, then most probably I will not be so concerned about the group. And that makes an important impact, in the sense, if I'm going to use a shaving cream, then it is not necessary that I will have to be influenced in this particular category. But on the other side, if I have to use a watch, then that being a conspicuous thing, visible to other people, then I will tend to be able to use something which will give me an association with the particular group. So all my behaviors will relate to that. Also remember that marketers normally tend to use these reference groups to ensure that there is kind of a conformance taking place. Idea conformance का ये है कि why should a consumer conform to the group behavior? Obviously, there has to be some characteristics, some criteria based on which जो group है वो influence करेगा. अगर आप गौर से देखें, sometimes you will see that people tend to, let's say there is a car that you want to buy or a car has to be sold, and if I link that car up with a particular dynamic management group and show that the progressive managers normally use this car, then anybody who sees himself as progressive will tend to be associated with that particular group. However, देखना ये है कि is that group really strong, and to be able to influence the group should have a few characteristics. Now, what are these characteristics? Number one, they should be able to inform or make the consumer aware of the product. अगर वो इस्तेमाल कर रहे हैं और वो उस ग्रुप का जो जिसको रेफरेंस जो लेना चाहता है या जिस इंडिविजुअल को उस ग्रुप से ताल्लुक कायम करना है, अगर वो उसको दिखाई ना सकें कि वो कौन सा प्रोडक्ट है, like I said, if some product is to be used privately for shaving, for example, तो उसका impact नहीं होगा. The second is that they should be able to provide an opportunity to this individual to be able to compare his behavior and thinking with the attitude and behavior of the reference group. So the second point is कि अगर वो ये कर सकें, तो अगर वो opportunity provide कर सकें उस individual को कि वो compare कर सके, then the influence will be there, otherwise the influence will not be there. Now, अगर influence करना है, तो अगर वो adopt करता है attitude को, तो वो जो behavior है, वो किसी ना किसी shape में consistent होना चाहिए उस group behavior के साथ. उसमें there should not be any contradiction. So that is another frame where influence will go higher. If I can suggest that through conformity, through adopting the behavior of the group, I can be directly associated with it, then the behavior will be, taken up. The influence will be much, much stronger. अगर वो मैं ना कर सकूं कि conformity दिखा ना सकूं, तो उसका impact बहुत कम होगा. Finally, there is something like legitimizing the decision. अगर मैं उस product के इस्तेमाल को legitimate ना कर सकूं related to the group itself, तो उसका influence again नहीं होगा. मिसाल लेते हैं, if there is a club और club के अंदर कई clubs हैं, they have different dress codes. For example, अगर आप बाहर अमेरिका जाएं, तो the logic or the requirement is that you should always wear a black tie with your dress. Now, obviously, the person has to be informed that black tie is important. You can also make the person aware, और कई जगहों के ऊपर इस किस्म की conditionality में अगर कोई इंडिविजुअल चला भी जाए और उस क्लब में जाने की कोशिश करे और वो टाई उसके पास ना हो, तो क्लब प्रोवाइड करता है टाई, बट दे विल नॉट अलाउ द पर्सन टू गो इनटू द क्लब विदाउट दैट. और जैसे मैंने कहा, कंपैरिजन भी होता है क्योंकि द पर्सन हु इज गोइंग टू द क्लब सीज एवरीबडी एल्स वेयरिंग द सेम ब्लैक टाई, सो एक किस्म की लॉजिकल लिंकिंग उसके साथ सेट हो जाती है. देन व्हेन वी लुक एट के अडॉप्ट करता है, तो फिर ही उसको इजाजत होती है, तो दैट क्रिएट्स अ स्ट्रॉन्ग इन्फ्लुएंस, बिकॉज इफ आई वांट टू गो टू द क्लब देन आई पर फोर्स विल हैव टू वेयर इट, और इसी तरह से लेजिटिमेसी उसके अंदर पैदा हो जाती है. अब द इशू इज दैट इफ देयर इज अ न्यू प्रोडक्ट, सो मार्केटर्स क्या करते हैं, पर्टिकुलरली जो लीडर्स हैं, मार्केट लीडर्स होते हैं, उनकी कोशिश ये होती है कि द पीपल हु आर, इफ यू रिकॉल, द laggards or the late entrants to the market, लेट अडॉप्टर्स जो होते हैं या मेजॉरिटी जो होती है, तो लीडर्स की कोशिश ये होती है कि वो कन्विंस करें इन लेट मेजॉरिटी लेगर्ड्स को कि वो उस बिहेवियर से कंफर्म करें जिस बिहेवियर की वजह से दे हैव बिकम मार्केट लीडर्स. फॉर एग्जांपल, कंपनी व्हिच इज अ लीडर इन लेट्स से मोबाइल फोन्स, एंड they want the people who are coming late in the market to buy the product, so they try and promote that 70% of the market or 30% of the market, या जो market leader है वो है ही एक brand, so that people tend to buy the same brand. And this is for market leaders. However, अगर market leader ना हो, and if the product has been launched new, तो फिर क्या होगा? Normally what those people tend to do is that they try and challenge the consumer to break this trend, and they try and convince the market or the target or the consumer that you do not have to follow everybody. So there are advertisements which try and work on both the sides, कोशिश यही है कि leader tries to make everybody conform to their product, whereas newcomers try to break this trend. Let me recapitulate again. The issue that we are talking about is कि जो reference groups हम इस्तेमाल करते हैं उनका जो influence है on consumer behavior, उसको कौन सी चीजें influence करती हैं, and we talked about the credibility, the experience of the credibility or the power of the group itself, the experience or information available to the consumer himself, the conspicuousness of the product itself, and the behavior of the market leaders or the market challengers in terms of जो product बेच रहे हैं उनके जो behaviors हैं वो भी impact करते हैं on the influence of the groups that we are talking about. Now the kind of groups that we have, there are 6 types, and the first one is the friendship group, the second one is the shopping, third is the work group, fourth is the virtual communities, fifth is brand communities, and finally we have consumer action forums or groups. So the first one we look at it, if friendship groups hote kya? Friendship group, what is that? It's basically very unstructured, lacks authority. However, it is the most influential. That is what is important. Friendship groups are very important in terms of what we buy for our dresses, the kind of fast food that we take, simple jewelry, fashion jewelry that we use. All these are directly influenced by the friends group. And obviously, the drive in a human being is to have some kind of a social gathering in which friends take an important frame. Friends की importance क्यों marketers के लिए है? Because friends normally tend to communicate all those things which they may not be able to communicate directly to their family. इसलिए जो friends का group है has a very direct impact on consumer behavior, and I've already given you the areas where basically they operate. Then we have shopping groups. Now, shopping group is a very interesting concept. उसका मकसद ये है कि ये shopping groups कुछ चीजें perform करते हैं, and those performances are very important. We look at ये normally निकलते जो हैं वो family से और friends से ही हैं, in the sense के चंद friends will get together or family members and they go for shopping. उसकी importance क्या है? The reason basically is that it tries to reduce, it's a social factor also, और हम देखते हैं कि बहुत सारे malls अब जो create हो रहे हैं पाकिस्तान में भी हैं, internationally, all of them, they try and provide services which are like a social occasion where people can go, have fun, stay there for some time while they are doing shopping, and this is normally done in a shopping group form. Iska, therefore, one of the reasons, and that is why what people tend to say is one of the reasons for shopping is also to have a social get-together. Secondly, it helps to reduce risk. If you have a friend with you, तो जो decision लेना होता है, particularly in those cases where you are not very strongly aware of the product, तो वो थोड़ा उसका risk जो है वो कम हो जाता है, because there is a collaboration on decision making कि हम क्या करें. Similarly, defensive mechanisms जो हैं वो operative होते हैं, और defensive ये है कि अगर मिसाल के तौर पे in the first case the risk के अंदर I take my friend who is more aware of the product so he can guide me on terms of price and so on and so forth, and I will not make a mistake in making a purchase which may not be the one that I wanted or not at a price that I wanted, so the friend will help in reducing that kind of risk. On the other side, अगर ग्रुप ही को नहीं मालूम, यानी कि 4 या 3 जो लोग जो भी जा रहे हैं, if none of them is aware of the product itself और उसके various characteristics, तो ये जो ग्रुप के अंदर लोग जाएंगे, they will form a defensive pact in the sense that they get together and they are protecting each other from making a big mistake. Then there are certain other frames or shopping groups that have been created, which is known as in-house shopping. Now, in-house shopping का जो group है, उसका मकसद ये होता है that the product is brought to a house where it is demonstrated, and all that group, the people who are get togethering in that house have an opportunity to directly buy. And there is a company which is very very popular in case of जो dishes और ये glasses और ये dinnerware बेचते हैं, which is known as Tupperware. तो उनकी 90% ऑफ सेल्स ऑफ देयर 1 बिलियन सेल्स की जो उनकी जो रेवेन्यू है 90% कम्स फ्रॉम इन हाउस शॉपिंग ग्रुप्स और इन होम शॉपिंग ग्रुप्स. वो उनका तरीका ये है कि दे कलेक्ट पीपल इन अ हाउस and they demonstrate their products, lay them out in kind of different frameworks, and people tend to buy. Then there are some customer referral programs. वो भी grouping का एक तरीका है shopping groups का. मकसद ये है कि I am a member of a particular club or a particular society or a particular area, or I am actually buying a product. तो वो क्या कहते हैं, if you bring another customer, make another member, तो आपको कुछ बेनिफिट्स मिल जाते हैं या सम डिस्काउंट्स मिलते हैं. सो what is the method here is that again you're using a social group form to communicate and to create that. और group form के अंदर normally जो individual है वो ही अपने दोस्त को या whoever he is trying to influence, the impact is much stronger in that case. Third is the work group. Now this is more kind of a structured, more formal kind of a thing, and we normally find this in the offices that we work, in the areas that we work together. और इसके अंदर भी दो categories हैं. One category is where it's very formalized. Normally people tend to influence each other when they are on their workstation, they sit together and work and so on and so forth. उसका एक rational थोड़ा मुख्तलिफ है. फिर दूसरा एक ग्रुप है जो इनफॉर्मली फॉर्म हो जाता है, पर्टिकुलरली ड्यूरिंग लंच ब्रेक्स एंड टी ब्रेक्स. अगेन इन दोनों के जो इन्फ्लुएंसेस हैं दे आर टोटली डिफरेंट. इट हैज बीन सजेस्टेड दैट समटाइम्स वर्क ग्रुप जो फॉर्मलाइज्ड होते हैं उसमें द इम्पैक्ट इज वेरी शॉर्ट टर्म. व्हाई? बिकॉज द पर्सन इज इन्फ्लुएंस्ड बाय द पावर ऑफ द पर्सन ही वांट्स टू इन्फ्लुएंस और ही वांट्स टू डेमोन्स्ट्रेट. अगर एक आदमी पावरफुल पोजीशन में है तो वो जो चीजें वो करता है, आई डू इट नॉट फॉर लॉन्ग टर्म रीजनिंग बट फॉर द शॉर्ट रन, बिकॉज आई नो कि आई कैन suggest to him that I am following totally his behaviors, and he may be influenced by this approach and maybe look at me in a different frame than another person. But जो ग्रुप फॉर्म होता है चाय के ऊपर जो कि इनफॉर्मल होता है, वहाँ ज्यादातर कम्युनिकेशन जो है वो इंफॉर्मेशन फ्लो से है. In the sense, I ask somebody about a product, the product is not, the information is given freely to me. I have credibility in the group setting. I know that this person is not going to benefit from there. So I normally have a better, what do you call, the impact is more stronger. लेकिन जैसे मैंने कहा, in the case of power, particularly the workplace power, वहाँ ये इम्पैक्ट ज्यादा देर के लिए नहीं रहता, बिकॉज मेरा मकसद सिर्फ अपने से पावरफुल आदमी को ये दिखाना है that I am also behaving in the ways that he is behaving. So there is a little bit of a linkage there. Then we are coming into the virtual communities, and these virtual communities, if you recall, we have been talking about the website. अब तो ये, I mean, it is becoming a major social market, social interactive frames आ चुके हैं. Facebook, Twitter, these blogs, they're all virtual communities which get together on areas of interest, and then they try and influence each other on various thoughts, various items, various ideas. And now marketers have started using it in terms of even promoting their own products. Virtual communities के हवाले से we were talking, so we need to first actually define communities क्या होते. Communities are basically set of social relations among people, and a social relation can be whatever method of communication you have with the individual. And like I was telling you, nowadays websites are becoming a very critical area where communities get together virtually and they can discuss anything. There is a number of wide range of topics that are available. Wide range of discussions can take place about products. Blogs are there. If you now would be witnessing, most of the celebrities, they have their own Twitter frames. They put their information on Facebook. They have a direct exchange of ideas and thoughts. And the logic is that anybody who is particularly interested in a specific product or has a specific interest, a special interest, everybody will visit there. So अगर आप गौर से देखें so you can imagine the amount of cost reduction that takes place, because now we are marketing the thing directly to the people who will only be interested in it, and it is little different from the kind of media marketing that we do in terms of newspapers or television, where when we send an ad or we send an advertisement, we show a program, it can go to anybody, which may also include people who are really not interested. So we are actually incurring wasted cost because it's not really targeted. However, in this case, the idea is that people who are interested would automatically go to the area, and obviously they will be linking up and they will be discussing all this. The second part of this is कि यहाँ tremendous amount of information available हो जाती है in all forms, चाहे वो technical information हो, चाहे वो किसी item से और from news concept से या news की topic से, all kinds of information becomes available, and people tend to understand that this information flow is totally for their own benefit and they can contribute in this interactive system. और अगर आप फिर गौर करें that the interaction was one of the critical points. Then what we have is brand communities. Brand communities are now becoming a very important, potent force in marketing. Normally, marketers have discovered this, that when you put together a group of people who are brand loyal to your brand, तो half से ज़्यादा काम तो वो कर रहे होते हैं, in the sense that they try and influence other people. और अगर हमने, if we just look back at the discussions we have had earlier, कि if I have bought something, then I want to prove that I have done the right thing. I will either convince somebody else or get together with a group of people who have also bought the same product, so that जो dissonance का concept है वो eliminate हो जाए. And this has been exploited very effectively by Harley Davidson when they launched their brand community of hogs. अब उसके base के ऊपर there are so many other brands who have started these brand communities where they try and create events, they have functions, they have marches, they have some kind of adventurous kind of get-togethers. All this is aimed at bringing these people together very strongly, and then these are the people who not only promote but also defend the product in every forum that you have. और उसका idea और उसका मकसद यही है कि किसी ना किसी point के ऊपर these people now bring to bear their influence, particularly when the person wants to conform to a particular characteristic. और हर आदमी की कोशिश होती है कि वो किसी ना किसी known चीज के साथ associate हो. Now this brings us to the last, which is basically consumer action forums. ये पाकिस्तान में it's not that popular, but slowly over a period of time this concept is taking hold. और consumer protection के लिए these groups get together so that they can protect their own groupings, और उसका influence भी खासा strong होना शुरू हो गया है कि consumer action forums जो हैं, particularly if they are trying to protect against malpractices, against areas where we come into position where a product has damaged somebody. So these kind of activities are becoming very strong outside. This finishes our area where we are interested in the kind of groups that we have, which are, which have influence on individuals. In the next lecture, we will move on to family, and we will try and look at the family concept is very important. Why? Because we know that family starts from when you get married, and then you keep moving from different stages of life. You have children, then you have at the end of the life where there are, you do not have any other older child in your home. Why? Because they have all left, they get married, so you become old, and all during this period, influence will change. So we will be talking about the influence that the family has on consumer behavior, and also on the people which are the targets. At the end, let's go back, quickly recapitulate what we have discussed. We finished the lecture on the communication strategy. We went through the concept of reference group and we decided that reference group की जो knowledge है वो marketer के लिए बहुत important है. Why? Because if he understands what is the reference group that a person is going to associate with, and if they know the behavior of that reference group and the attitudes and the activities that the group performs, then they can promote or they can use those in their own advertisements. We've already also discussed the factors that can influence the influence of these reference groups on consumer behavior, as well as we did discuss the various groups that we have. Specifically, we talked about the friendship group, the shopping group, the work group, the virtual communities, and brand communities, as well as consumer action forums. And this brings us to the end. Next time we will start with the families. Okay. Allah Hafiz. Thank you very much.